My name is Dennis Levin. I'm retired. Welcome to our Wesley Bible study. And today we're going to do Exodus chapter 14, the crossing of the Red Sea, or at least we'll try and get across the water. We'll see how it goes. All right. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the Israelites to turn back and camp in front of Pi Hahiroth, between Migdal and the sea, in front of Baal Zephon. And you shall camp opposite it by the sea. Pharaoh will say of the Israelites, 'They are wandering aimlessly in the land. The wilderness has closed in on them. I will harden Pharaoh's heart, and he will pursue them, so that I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army, and the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord.'" And they did so. All right. If you're trying to get the people into the promised land, okay, that is your main objective. Okay? To get the people into the promised land, am I right? Okay, so what difference does it make whether or not Pharaoh recognizes God as God or the people in Egypt know that God is God? Who cares? They're leaving. Right?
Well, no, he wants to be a witness to the other people left behind.
Well, okay, there's that. All right.
It's not a very good witness, though.
No, it's not. Actually, it's not. As a matter of fact, it is not just to let Pharaoh and the Egyptians know who is God, it's also to terrorize everyone in Canaan where they're going. So that
Ulterior motive is to let those people know, hey, we're coming.
we're on our way, and when we start getting into your land, watch out, because if we could knock over Pharaoh, hey, guess what? Okay? So, from a propaganda standpoint, it's interesting to note that God does not want the Egyptians to know that God is God for the sake of their salvation.
Okay.
There is no interest in their salvation in knowing who God is.
How do we know that?
Because they didn't change religion.
I know, but how do we know that God didn't want, that was not a motive of his?
Well, because he's killing them.
Still like that.
Well, no,
And even though everything is the Egyptians, they're the Jews' God. They're never their God.
right.
They never say, well, let us join your religion and let him
Right.
be our God. All he's done for you,
Right.
let him do that for us.
Okay.
And there was never any of that.
There was never any of that. And this is something that I want you to pay attention to because it has to do with the whole invasion of Canaan. Okay? Not just the escape from Egypt, but the whole invasion of Canaan. There was a covenant made with Abraham. Okay? Covenant was threefold. It was the promised land, okay? That generations would be a great people. The nations of the world would be blessed. Those three things were in the covenant. And the covenant was also contingent on Abraham and the generations following him, following the God of Abraham. Submitting to the God of Abraham, following the laws of the God of Abraham. That was the contingency. The thing that he laid on Abraham was, I'll do this for you if you get up and go somewhere else. Because he lived in Ur of the Chaldees, where I have been. Okay, and from what I saw, it was a good deal. But this whole thing, this point in the covenant that through you the nations of the world will be blessed, is absent in the escape from Egypt and in the invasion of Canaan. There is no indication that the children of Abraham had any intention of being a blessing to anybody that they encountered on the journey. And because of that constant characteristic, I'm deriving from this that God is not interested in the salvation of the Egyptians. He is interested in the reduction of the Egyptians.
That's kind of scary.
Yes, it is. Okay? So yeah, this is a very scary God that we see in the Old Testament. This is a very scary God. He can whack the enemies of the people of God, and he has no problem at all whacking the people of God too, if he calls for it. So yeah, this is a scary God.
So his goal really is to get his people into the land that he has promised them.
No, his goal is to establish himself as the predominant God to everybody that they encounter.
But he's, to the people that he encountered, but his goal is to be their God as well.
Oh yes, absolutely. Now they better not deviate from that. Okay? The promise of the land is the vehicle by which God is making the statement. When the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, the minds of Pharaoh and his officials were changed toward the people, and they said, "What have we done letting Israel leave our service?" So he had his chariot made ready and took his army with him. He took 600 elite chariots. They had really fast chariots, by the way. And all the other chariots of Egypt with officers over all of them. The Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. So God is setting him up. Okay? And he pursued the Israelites who were going out boldly. The Egyptians pursued them, all Pharaoh's horses and chariots, his chariot drivers, and his army. They overtook them, camped by the sea by Pi-Hahiroth, in front of Baal Zephon. And as Pharaoh drew near, the Israelites looked back, and there were the Egyptians advancing on them in great fear. The Israelites cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because," I love this, because when, I grew up around my, Jewish family a little bit, and when they want to make a statement, they do it like in a question. If they really want to come down on you, they ask you a question, And here's the type of question that they would ask. "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you've taken us away to die in the wilderness? What have you done to us, bringing us out of Egypt? Is this not the very thing we told you in Egypt? Let us alone so that we can serve the Egyptians. For it would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the wilderness." It's so Jewish, I love it.
You did a good job.
Yeah, it's my shtick. So anyway. But Moses said to the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm and see the deliverance that the Lord will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall never see again. The Lord will fight for you, and you have only to keep still." All right, this is a theme also that you're going to see in the invasion of Canaan. From time to time, there are victories. And not just in the invasion of Canaan, but also in the Assyrian attacks much later on. There are, from time to time, instances where God intervenes directly and wins the battle, or God diminishes his own forces to the point where there is no other explanation except that God did this. And it goes on even today. I remember in 1976, I was at Fort Bragg, and I was in an intelligence unit, and it was the 76 war in Israel. I had been called up to go to Israel for that war. And the Russians had paratroopers on their planes with the engines running, and we had paratroopers in planes with the engines running, and if ever one of those planes took off, it would have been us and the Russians, okay? So it was a very high tense time. And during the course of that stalemate between us and Russia, I was a duty officer at the Intel Center, where the information comes in. And so I was getting intel from all over the world, but especially in the Middle East. They were following very, very carefully how this war was progressing, stuff that was not released to the public, okay? And everything that I'm saying now is public, okay? It's nothing classified. But I went through all the message traffic, and as I watched, the Israelis were getting hammered. They were getting decimated. They had lost most of their tanks. They had lost most of their air force. They had lost thousands of men already. And they did not have the wherewithal to resist the Egyptian incursion in the Sinai. The Egyptians, for once in their lives, were tactically very proficient. They were well advised by Russians. That was a good deal and a bad deal, which we'll find out later. But there wasn't any way for the Israelis really to defend their country. They were going to be annihilated. They were being attacked on three sides. And, but they did. They did. The Egyptian army was moving forward unimpeded, and then they stopped. They just stopped. There wasn't any reason there was a reason for them to stop. They were following Russian tactics. And Russian tactics are always on a timetable. So you go so far and then you stop and get replenished, okay? Well, they didn't need to be replenished because they had plenty of stuff by the time they stopped. But it was time to stop, so they stopped. And during that time that they stopped, the Israelis got their act together. Nixon sent them a bunch of tanks out of the National Guard. He depleted all of our tanks. And the Israelis withstood them. They started getting planes, they got tanks, they got armaments, and there is no way they could have won without the hand of God intervening, as far as I could see. From all the intel traffic I was getting, I said, boy, God's in this one, for sure. Same thing here, okay? God is going to fight on their side. But I want you to know that's not just ancient history. That's modern history as well. Okay, but Moses said to the people, do not be afraid, stand firm. Okay, we went all that. Then the Lord said to Moses, God is so Jewish too. He says, why do you cry out to me? Tell the Israelites, go forward. But you, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea and divide it, that the Israelites might go into the sea on dry ground. Then I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them. And so I will gain glory for myself over Pharaoh and all his army, his chariots, and his chariot drivers. God is not interested in Pharaoh's salvation. Okay? Then the Egyptians shall know that I, the Lord, have gained glory for myself over Pharaoh, his chariots, his chariot drivers. The angel of God, who was going before the Israelite army, moved and went behind them, and a pillar of cloud moved from in front of them and took its place behind them. It came between the army of Egypt and the army of Israel, and so the cloud was there with the darkness, and it lit up the night. How do you do that? One did not come near the other all night. Okay? There are several things that might have happened. Okay? One of them is, and I have seen this, that there is a shamal that comes out. And when it comes, it is a wall, a cloud. And it's like hundreds of feet high. And when it moves, you can't see past it at all. And you know something horrible, dreadful is coming your way. The other explanation, and this ties into the crossing itself. This area, okay, now what are we talking, let's get to the map here. These red lines are where scholars think the people went, okay? You can tell the GPS wasn't working too well. So anyway, this is where they think the crossing of the Red Sea happened. This is the Red Sea. So when I was growing up and doing Sunday school and people talked about going across the Red Sea, they were talking about going across here. Okay? So what it meant was they went from the land of Goshen, not down this side of the Red Sea, they went down the other side of the sea. And it might have been that some people think that it was the Great Bitter Lake that they went across. Okay? But the Bible says Red Sea. This is the Red Sea. Okay? This is the Gulf of Aqaba. I don't think they called it the Gulf of Aqaba back then. They might have called the whole thing the Red Sea. I don't know. See, it says Red Sea down here. Okay? So they might have considered that and that part of the Red Sea. But they think the most likely thing was that they left the land of Goshen, they went to Sukkoth, we know that. They crossed over here. So maybe it happened here. Okay? Didn't have to go across there. If you go down to Sukkoth, you don't have to go up and around through the water. You can go like that. So I don't know why there isn't a red line there. Anyway. So this is a possibility. Okay, this is a possibility all the way down here and all the way up. Okay, and then down again to cross the Red Sea. You know, it's all of this. I have flown over this. This is really rotten country. This is horrible. I can't believe anybody would even live there. Okay, Midianites seem to like it, but this is really rough area. Okay, but if they chased them this far, that's a long way to go.
Well,
On foot.
They make it sound like they just did it. I mean,
Yeah.
they left Egypt and then they came to the Red Sea.
Yeah.
They didn't have all that time to go all the way down there.
That's what yeah, so this line kind of makes more sense to me in a way, except why stop? Why not just go up there? But anyway,
Is that mountainous territory?
oh yeah,
That's what,
mountain, and I'm talking about no vegetation, barren stuff, okay? Anyway, there's something to know about this region. Right through here and right through here are huge fault lines. This was, during that period, seismically very active. Okay? So, I mean, later on, we're going to see that the angel created a great wind and it blew the waters apart, you know, and Cecil B. DeMille had fun trying to put that one together, but a couple of things kind of make more sense. One of them is that because of the seismic activity, for one thing, you have this dark cloud with light in it. So if you have a dark cloud with light in it, and it lights up the night, okay, could this have been some ash being spewed from a volcano somewhere? Possibility, okay? Could it just have been, like, for instance, this stuff gets into the upper atmosphere and it'll create thunderstorms, but that's way up there. Don't know, okay? But because there's seismic activity going on during this time, it's entirely possible that that cloud could have been an ash cloud, because they describe it the same way as the darkness that they had in Egypt before, okay? Another thing is, like, if this was a tsunami, the waters wouldn't have piled up on one side. The waters would have flowed out of the Gulf one way and then comes roaring back in, okay? But on a tsunami, you don't have time between those events for 600,000 people to get across, okay?
Well, isn't some things you read say it says Sea of Reeds
Sea of Reeds,
instead of the Red Sea?
yeah,
And something I read a long time ago said it was a Sea of Reeds. The
which
wind-
would be this one up here, I think.
If the wind blew, it would blow the water out and it would make the land dry. And then when the wind blew the other way, it would blow the water back in. That wasn't the Cecil B. DeMille's walls of water, it would make the land marsh. And this
Yes.
read that they got, the chariots got, and the people got in there, and the water came back in, chariots couldn't move, horses couldn't move,
Yes,
and, I mean, there could be a lot of explanations.
yes, that's exactly right. And what my New Testament teacher told me, you can pays your money and takes your choice.
You know, in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't really matter.
No,
It happened.
it happened, but
How it happened, maybe it's not.
it's not terribly important, but if it was a natural event, the timing is the miracle, okay?
Yeah.
And when you look at what entailed in that event, then a seismic event makes more sense to me. And for a couple of reasons. One of them is you have this big ash field with coals and stuff, so you have a combination of the fire and the smoke. Okay. Watch this. Moses stretched out his hand over the sea. The Lord drove the sea back by a strong east wind all night, and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were divided. Okay. I have always wondered how a wind that was strong enough to divide the waters would not blow everybody down while they're trying to cross over. Okay, I'm just saying. That was one of the things I thought about even when I was going through Sunday school. So, let's see what happens here. The Israelites went into the sea on dry ground, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued and went into the sea after them, all of Pharaoh's horses, chariots, and chariot drivers. At the morning watch, the pillar of fire and cloud looked down on the Egyptian army and threw the Egyptian army into panic. Well, of course, if you have an event like that, a seismic event going on, it's going to throw them into panic. He clogged their chariot wheels so that they turned with difficulty. The Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the Israelites, for the Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Okay, what could have happened seismically? What could have happened, and I'm not saying it did, I'm just saying, from my perspective, going back to my earth science days in high school, okay? What could have happened was there was a seismic event. And when that happens, you have sometimes the magma just below the surface creates a dome. And when it creates a dome, it will push the waters on one side and on the other. And this is something I did experience. The ground over there is horribly unstable. We think of this as all desert and sand. It is not. It is sand and clay fines. And if you shake it right, it turns into the worst mud you have ever seen. Okay? I have driven through it. I know what it's like. If it was a chariot, I would not have gotten through it. Okay? So these people walking across here, for one thing, are going to stir up a tremendous amount of dust. Because I know what it was like following a column, of a convoy through this stuff, and it just throws clouds of stuff into the air. So all your fines come up. And then, God forbid, you have a little bit of rain, or the ground shakes right, all of a sudden this thing turns into glue. I mean, it just turns into glue. And apparently that's what happened to the chariot wheels of the Egyptians. Can't explain that with a wind. Especially if the people just went over on dry ground. Now people are getting stuck. So
the people of that day didn't know about all the seismic
No.
stuff that was going on.
oh no, it was all,
Okay, I'm having a real hard time here.
yes,
I believe the whole story, I know they crossed the Red Sea and all that, but I still have a hard time how they got from there to where you're pointing to that night. Because that's the way I read it. Is
Yeah.
They left Egypt and came to the Red Sea and
Yep.
crossed the Red Sea, and here come the Egyptians behind them.
right, well,
The whole thing is just, I believe it, don't get me wrong, but I'm having a hard time understanding the time frame. there.
yeah, well, this is the problem when you're relying on historians who aren't.
True.
okay? There isn't, nobody who was writing this was there.
Right, so why didn't they just say by a miracle of God, they all got, they crossed the Red Sea and.
Because then you wouldn't have the book of Acts.
Then we wouldn't have a book of Exodus.
We're really relying on their story.
Yes,
Right, exactly. And
We
there's
are.
there's the thing, we're relying on people that are retelling the story and retelling the story and retelling the story and retelling the story.
yes, who
It's
do
kind of-
not have a scientific background.
Yeah.
Right, exactly.
If you see a seismic event, God's mad. That's the extent of their science.
I would have liked to have had that here, that God, this all happened during a science, rather than, I would like to have had some kind of scientific explanation.
Wouldn't we all?
In this part, rather than the fact that
Wouldn't we all? You know what?
I want Paul Harvey.
I'll give you the rest of the story, okay? Everything that you read in the Bible requires an element of faith, not science. It requires an element of faith. Okay? So you're talking about people who are writing history based on their faith, not based on science. All right? But in a 21st century
Right,
situation where we do have science, where some of these things could have been explained, and you see a sequence of events that follows a natural pattern, you begin to realize that this story could very well be true. Because while they didn't understand the pattern, they described it,
yeah, I'll go with that.
okay? So,
It's like Ann and I were talking, I said, remember what Pastor Carl said, that's not the right question.
exactly,
Right.
exactly. You can't ask these people for a scientific explanation of anything.
But in their mind, God did this.
Yes,
Yeah, right. I mean,
and I would agree, because
Yeah,
God created the
I
heavens and the
not.
earth,
Yeah.
right? This is God's earth.
And he's planning this the whole trip, so he's
Yeah,
got it
and-
all mapped out. He just didn't tell us that.
Well, okay, and one of the things that has expanded my understanding of God is when we look at these miracles, we say, okay, all of a sudden God said, there, split the sea. Okay, there, bang, right? I think today I'm going to create this cloud between them and the Israelis, okay? To set up the timing for an event like this took aeons. God would have to know when that seismic event and the nature of the seismic event and all of that stuff to get his people and the Egyptians to play into the event to make it happen. And, I think about God now as not somebody who just comes up with an idea on the spur of the moment. You
So in
know?
other words, this is God's plan, has been, he's waiting for the right time.
You
And
bet.
The time has come.
Yeah.
that he's gonna take his people out of Egypt.
That's right.
This is
Why didn't he do it before?
because the time wasn't right. It's
Why
like,
let him-
it's
why-
like,
why-
it's like everybody tells us right now, when you pray for something, it's God's timing.
Yeah. So think about that when you ask for your miracles.
Can you please make it on my timeline?
That would be no.
No.
Yeah, we are, we're pretty limited, but, if God sees that his people are falling into slavery, why wait 200 years to spring them? Or if you've got a direct route into the promised land, why go through all this? Okay? So, there's something else going on here, because if the objective was just to get them into Canaan, hey, there's a shortcut.
The way I read it, and we all read it a little different, and you're talking about, right, it's a straight shot, and it took them 40 years. In my mind, I think it was training, it was education. they were slaves, they were illiterate, they had no religious training as well as no reading, writing skills. So.
They actually did have writing skills.
Well, okay, but they weren't educated, they were slaves.
By and large, they were not, but they had a written language that was not Egyptian.
And I think part of that, in my mind, is that it was all an education process. That instead of taking the straight shot, just as we read, he parts the sea, however he did it, and they cross, and then they have no water, so they start grumbling again.
Yeah,
Which brings that here for, to die? Why don't we just stay back there? So
Right.
their mindset is very short-lived. And so it's an education process to really train them who their God really is.
yeah,
Is the
and
way it looks to me.
that's what it looks like to me, and it's one thing that cautions me to realize that maybe I'm going through a training process too.
Are we all?
Yeah, we are, and I think that's one of the reasons why God is sometimes a lot more patient with us than we expect him to be, because we are much less patient with each other than God is with us. Okay, I guess we're getting on that time. Yeah, we are. Okay. Okay, then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, so that the water may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, the chariot drivers." So Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at dawn the sea returned to its normal depth. As the Egyptians fled before it, the Lord tossed the Egyptians into the sea. The waters returned and covered the chariots of the chariot drivers, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed them into the sea. Not one of them remained, but the Israelites walked on dry ground through the sea, the waters forming a wall for them on their right and their left. If the dome goes down, so do the Egyptians. That's how I look at it. Thus the Lord saved Israel that day from the Egyptians, and the Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Israel saw the great work that the Lord did against the Egyptians, so the people feared the Lord and believed in the Lord and in his servant Moses until they got thirsty. Okay, I just added that last part. Okay, so thank you for being with us this morning, and God bless you. If you have any questions or comments or snide remarks, then mail them in. And next week's is going to be live streamed, so you'll be able to pick it up early in the week if you need to. And we'll talk about these terrible songs of Moses in chapter 15. Okay, well, God bless you, and have a splendid new year.
Thank you, Dennis.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just got a message from Amanda that Kristen, said her mom felt a shot in her thigh this morning. She